welcome everybody to Talking Lines with Content and NBY the Nerd. NBY, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Content. How you doing, man?
Good, man. So today we're going to discuss the evolution of media distribution. All right.
All right.
We have been blessed. If you're in your 30s and up, we've been pretty blessed to witness the evolution of just everything evolving around entertainment, whether it's been games, music, and home video, you know?
Right.
So one of the things that I was first introduced to as far as when we was watching videos was, let's see, before there was VCR, there was, what they call it. It was a device where you used to be able to watch tapes, but I forget what it was called. It was like a different.
You have, okay, we go back to the first thing was the reel-to-reel projector. So that's where you had a film projector, and it was like two reels, and they would bring that out, a media day at school, and we would watch a film, and that was probably my first introduction to video media as far as outside of going to the movie theaters. And then they came with these giant tape decks called Beta. They were called Beta tape decks, and they were like these huge, cassette-looking things, for video, and that was those. And then around the same time that those got popular, VHS came on the market, and there was a battle between the two, as to see which one was going to become the predominant home media choice for video, and obviously VHS ended up winning out. So I'm thinking you're talking about the Beta decks.
Yes, that was my first introduction because my grandfather was recording movies from HBO onto those.
No.
So he was recording movies, and I was watching movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark, stuff like that.
Right.
I was watching those movies on Beta.
Wow.
Before we transferred to VHS, and then VHS got, extremely popular.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, VHS was around for a minute, too. It was around for a minute, man, because I remember, do you remember, like, how the Disney VHS cassette tapes used to look?
Yeah, you talking about the case that came in, that big plastic, molded case, rather than the paper sleeve that most, VHS tapes came in. Is like a conformed paper, but the Disney ones had that big plastic, molded area where the tape fed in there, real nice and snug. Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, and you couldn't store it anywhere though. It fit in no shelf whatsoever.
Yeah, it was outside the custom size, so you couldn't buy like those. They used to have those VHS racks, where you could put movies in, organize them and stuff. The Disney ones would always throw off your rack. You have to have a special spot for them on a shelf or something because they just wouldn't fit.
Yeah, they were so big, man. So, like, we grew up in that, had all that going on. And then, do you remember the switch to DVDs? Like, was that around 99, 2000?
Well, first and foremost, I actually remember us graduating to Laserdisc. And
I remember that too.
It was like as big as a LP for a record, and it was big. It was silver, and it was huge, and we couldn't afford one at home, but at my school we had them. And the thing I hated about them is that you would have to like play half the movie and then flip it to play the other half. As big as that thing was, it wouldn't hold an entire movie on one side of the disc. And some movies you had to have two discs. that were double sided. So
That's crazy.
yeah, man, it was just a back then we that was a media format for video, but it did give you a better quality picture. But that was only if you had the connections to make it better. Like, see, you had the RCA connections, right, which was your standard plug-in for composite, right, and then you had your coaxial connection, which was the little the cable connection that you would screw into the back of the TV. So the RCA always gave you better picture. And then they introduced this thing called Super Video or Super VHS. And so that was like a multi-pin connection that you could plug into your TV. So depending on your television and all of that, your quality would be better, but only if you had everything that you needed to get that full quality. So yeah, man, needless to say, we didn't have everything for that. We were like still stuck on coaxial cables. We was running a coaxial cable from the VCR to the TV. So, and it was funny, man, like as we started to get into the DVD age, you would watch old VHSs and you'd be like, man, how the heck did we sit here and watch this? This thing is so blurry and and I remember us when we were younger, we would watch it, we'd be so amazed at how good it looked. And now it just looks so.
Because back then that was top quality.
That was top quality. So yeah, man, it's amazing. So, but yeah, then right after the laser disc, you saw the DVD come in, and then they started competing to whether which one was going to be the dominant media for movies and video. And the funny thing is, in the adult entertainment industry, is actually, I read an article about this, was actually the industry that solidified the home video choice. Because back in the VHS beta debate, they chose VHS. And so all the adult video companies started putting their movies on VHS, and those were the ones that were getting rented the most. So VHS became the standard. And then when DVD and Laserdisc started competing, they chose DVD, and so DVD became the standard. So we have to thank the adult industry uh, for our media choices. Because
Wow.
for video, man, they're the ones that really made the choice for us, as far as home video is concerned. So yeah, I remember when DVD came around, man, and that was top quality right there. So, and then people were starting to get flat screen televisions, and they weren't the flat screens that you know of now. They were just a big old square box. It's just the front of the screen was flat. So instead of having that little bulge out, that the screen, it was just a flat square screen, but it was still square and it still had a tube. It was just a flat square screen. So that was the latest thing, man. So I definitely remember that, man. That's crazy.
That was, man. That was. And then right after that, man, we got introduced into streaming, right? Which is what's known for today.
Yeah, I would say like streaming's predecessor is downloadable content. So once the internet became prevalent in people's household, you really couldn't stream yet because the internet wasn't fast enough, but you could download digital movies. So now with the advent of Windows Media, because I know you've watched a movie or two on Windows Media, or DivX. The DivX player. Remember the DivX player? And so that became a format that people would do. They would go online, they would download this movie, however long that took. Sometimes it would take days. It would take days of downloading to get one movie, and then you watch a digital version on your computer, And if you had the capabilities, you would plug in your computer to your television and you can watch a digital download on your computer. So I think that was the predecessor to streaming. And so that started to become very popular as internet speed started to increase, because you can download multiple movies really quickly. And then you started the the mobile devices started having, um, you know, suited for you to be able to download to them, like the iPod with the video, face on the front of it. People started to download that, and they would be able to watch music videos or what have you on there. And then the smartphone came. And when the smartphone came, that's when the video streaming really started to pick up. Because around the same time as the smartphone came out, you had the introduction of YouTube. And so YouTube and all of these different platforms like YouTube really were the platforms that got us used to streaming our media content, meaning that we didn't have to download it. We can literally just watch it from the website. And I know everybody had a real player back then. Remember having to install real player on your computer
Oh yeah.
just so you could watch a clip that was on the internet, so you didn't have to download it anymore. You're like, oh man, this is great. I don't have to sit here and wait. I could just watch it. But then what do we have to do? We used to have to, because our computers weren't fast enough, right? So we used to have to pause the stream, let it build up, right?
Yep.
Let it build up, and then when it got halfway through, then you press play so that the player wouldn't catch the streaming content before it played out. So yeah, man, that's where we got, and that's pretty much where we're at now. Now we're at the point where Netflix started, and now you could just pull up a movie on your device and just watch the movie without even buffering. Like most people, you get what, 30 seconds of buffering at the beginning of a video, and then that's it, and you watch the whole video.
That's it.
Man, it's
the whole video, man, and now it's a party.
And
now
it's
everybody's
a party.
Jumping on board.
Now it's a party, so we've come a
Disney
long way.
Plus.
We've come
Apple
a long
Plus.
way. Everybody's jumping on it. So streaming is the way as far as video is concerned, man. So that's crazy.
Yeah, man. So that's amazing that, people in the age of 30 and up got a chance to witness all of that.
Yeah. Go through all of that. Got a chance
to see all of that, man. And now, let's jump into the gaming, because even gaming has came a long way. Our game systems. Now, the first system I was introduced to was Nintendo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I wasn't introduced to Atari first. I've had family and relatives that had Atari, but I never messed with it.
Right. Yeah, well, that was...
what about you?
That was me. I was the Atari 2600 player. That was my first introduction to a home video game system. I had always had those little, football, portable games that you would buy at like a department store or whatever. And it had like the little sounds on it and stuff. And it's like, it's really pixelized, and you could play those. But my first console was an Atari. And I remember, this, elongated brown box with like rivets in it. And it had this one little slot in the middle and the two controller outputs. And the controllers weren't really controllers. They were like these, they looked like, little boxes with a wheel on top. And it had like two buttons on the side. And then they had introduced the better controllers where it was like a joystick, one button, and it was a square. And that's kind of the more modern. I think most people have seen that one for Atari. And that was the one we played. But it was real pixelized. I didn't really play it too much because it really wasn't that impressive, for for me as a kid, because, I was pretty much got it as a hand-me-down because it's older than I am. And I remember playing games like Popeye and E.T. and John Elway's football, and and I never really got into it, so I barely played that thing. The system that really got me into video games was the Sega Master System. And I remember getting the Sega Master System when I was a kid, and the medium that it had was a cartridge as well, but the game was in color. It had, I think, 8-bit pixelization. It had, very good sound for the time, and it had like characters I could play that from arcades. So I remember playing like Alter Beast and and Afterburner and Outrun and all of these games that you were used to go to the arcade and play. And one of my favorite was the Rambo game, man. I used to love that. It was basically just like Contra, but
Mhm.
I had never played Contra, so this was my first introduction to a game like this. So yeah, man, that was my first introduction to video games.
Nice, nice, man. So we had Nintendo. Now, did Sega Genesis came out before Super Nintendo, right? Super
Yes.
Nintendo was their answer to Sega Genesis.
Yeah, yeah. The Super Nintendo was the answer to the Sega Genesis. That's correct.
I never owned a Super Nintendo. I had a Nintendo, and then the next one I got was Sega Genesis.
Yeah, me either. I never had a Super Nintendo until later on in life. My wife had one when I met her, and that was my first time, really sitting down to play the Super Nintendo. And I could say that the graphics on certain games were better, as far as it played. But to me, the Genesis, it still was like my favorite system. Just the way the layout of the system and the games that were on it, I just enjoyed them way better. But there were games on the Super Nintendo that were standout games. Like I remember playing Killer Instinct on the Super
Yes,
Nintendo. Super Mario World was really good. Street Fighter Super on there was pretty good. Madden, the football games, they played better on the Super Nintendo. So yeah, man, the Super Nintendo was that next step in video gaming above. I think it was it 16 bit, either 16 or 32 bit. Cause I know the Genesis was 16 bit, but I'm not sure what the Super Nintendo was. But yeah, it had to be 32 because I think the next thing they released was the Nintendo 64, which was that
correct.
64 bit. So yeah, yeah, and Nintendo, definitely came through with the Super Nintendo. I think it's one of the favorite consoles for most Nintendo fans is the Super Nintendo. Up until now, I think the Switch is finally starting to really get people excited about what it can do. So yeah, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, right? Biggie said that.
That's right, that's right. And then what started to become popular as well was handheld games because Nintendo decided to come out with a Game Boy.
Yeah.
And I remember everybody I knew had a Game Boy except me. I'd never owned a Game Boy.
What? Oh
Um,
my gosh.
seriously, I missed out. I missed out in that era. I never had a Game Boy, but the make up for that, my grandfather, got me uh, Sega Game Gear,
Okay.
which Game Gear came out, and Game Gear was in color.
Yeah.
So he got me Game Gear, and I remember getting Sonic. I remember getting Mortal Kombat on Game Gear, and yeah, man, I love that, man. I never had the experience of the Game Boy, but yeah. And then Nintendo decided to come out with Game Boy Color.
Yeah. Right. Years later. Years later, they were too late to the party. But you know what? I actually watched a documentary about that, and the reason why the Game Boy was so successful was really they didn't rush the color aspect. And the reason why they didn't rush the color aspect is because they wanted people still to buy their console. If you think about it, if you put it in color back then, and it's cheaper, the games are cheaper, why would you buy the console? Especially if you got one kid and, just give them a handheld. Why even spend the money on the console? So they were smart. Nintendo was very smart about what they did. And the games that they released for the Game Boy, they were similar to the console but different. So it made it, made people who had the console want the want the Game Boy. So yeah, I had a Game Boy. I had the console as well, and the Game Boy was great, man. It was small for the time. You know, I wasn't a big fan of the black and white, but I got used to it, and the battery life was great. You know, instead of that was the one knock on the Sega Game Gear, because I had one as well, was the battery life. The battery life on the Game Gear was so short, and you had to have like 6 batteries. Whereas on the
Yes.
Nintendo, the Game Boy, you only needed 4 batteries, and the game life was much longer because it didn't have to power a backlight for color. You know, so that was the reason why people liked it. It lasted longer, and then you didn't have to worry about continuing to buy batteries. And then, like the Sega Game Gear, all of the attachments that went with it that made it really cool were very expensive. Like I never got the TV tuner. Did you ever get the TV tuner for it so you could watch live TV on it?
Nope.
Yeah, because I couldn't afford it. And the battery pack, the chargeable, rechargeable battery pack, couldn't get that either because it was too expensive. So, yeah, the Game Gear was a better quality system as far as the way it looked and the way it played, but it was too expensive because you're buying batteries. So my mom ended up getting like the rechargeable batteries you plug in the wall, and that worked for a little bit, but eventually I just got bored with it and moved on to I just decided I'm just gonna stick with the console. So
That's true. And then what we graduated to was 1995. Sony jumped into the picture with their PlayStation.
yeah,
And boy, did
so
things change.
that was an innovation. I give credit to Sega for that but Sega did it a very they were very dumb with the way they introduced it, because when they introduced the Sega CD, and that was the first platform where you had video games that are home console on a CD format, instead of making it its own console, they made it an attachment to the Sega Genesis. And it was like, why would you do that? Just build an entire console around this CD based system. You know, now if you look at it with all the attachments, you got the 32-bit expansion and the CD thing. It looked like this huge desktop computer on your entertainment center. That's not gonna be cool. So Sega slipped up
No.
on that, and so but Nintendo wanted to make a console that was CD based to compete with the Sega CD. And so they got with Sony, and Sony was like, okay, we're going to make this console together. And Nintendo ended up backing out of the deal. And so Sony was really upset about that. And so because of that, they created the Sony PlayStation, their own system. And boy, Nintendo looked it so crazy for their decision, because the Sony PlayStation is the #1 selling console in the history of video games. So,
Mm.
wow. Yeah, the Sony PlayStation, we go from the cartridge to the CD. And so that's our first, time getting to that evolution factor to where now video games are not held on these cartridges. Now they're on disc.
And man, did we play the heck out of that thing. I mean, it introduced, characters like Crash Bandicoot, and introduced like all these
Spyro.
different games that we played, man.
Yeah, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro. You got a chance to
Final
see those
Fantasy.
characters. Final Fantasy, Tom Clancy. You know,
Oh,
all of his games. How popular. Splinter Cell, Rainbow Six, all of these military games, Metal Gear. It just introduced the world to basically PC gaming. Because PC gaming was a big thing, but you had to be an insider. Because, not most people still at this point didn't have full blown PCs that could even power a video game. So this was PC gaming and an entertainment box to where any person, can go in the store and buy this and play these type of games. So PlayStation, it just blew everybody away. And then the sports games were amazing. Madden on
yeah.
there, NFL games on there, baseball games, basketball games. So and then
NBA Live.
NBA Live, and then they started to introduce not novelty games like Music Generator from MTV, or Parappa the Rapper. Remember that came out?
Ooh,
And so
Rapper the Rapper.
yeah, one of the worst best games in the history. People loved it because it was so bad. So that's one of those type of games. But yeah, you got a chance to see all of that. But
But look at this though. Nintendo said no, no, no. We're going to come out with 64. They came out with that in '96, and then I think I know not PlayStation, but didn't Sega come out with a Genesis 3 like in '97, like a
yeah,
smaller?
they came out with a smaller Genesis right before they introduced the Sega Saturn. So the Sega Saturn was like their competitive CD based system. So that's what they came out with. And then eventually they got up to their last console, which was the Dreamcast. And I'm a big Sega fan, so I owned all of those, man. They were great systems. They had so much stuff going against them that caused them to not be able to keep up with the sales of PlayStation.
Yeah, so they couldn't keep up. And another thing that, just the pace of how games were just being developed was growing so fast because you
Yeah.
had PlayStation 2 that came out, and then
Right.
you had Microsoft that introduced Xbox.
Yeah.
And I
And
think that was around, 2001?
yeah, and the introduction of the Xbox really swung the door wide open for internet gameplay as well. Because I know it started with Microsoft developing a internet-based system for the Dreamcast for Sega, where if you had a Dreamcast, it came with a Sega Online disc that you would put in your system, plug it into your phone line, and you can go online. But it was primitive. Many people didn't use it, so you didn't have as many people online to play with. But once the introduction of the Xbox came into play, that all changed. And so the Xbox became the go-to system for those people who were playing online already via their PCs. And so the Xbox took us into that next, evolution of media distribution, to where now you could buy a game from the store, but you can also play that game with your friend who's halfway across the country or even around the world.
That's right. That's right. And, that also, brung up, Xbox 360, and then we had PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, and then you had Nintendo also, like around 2006. Nintendo came out with the Wii system, and they've been on, that Wii system has been riding ever since 2006, since they debuted it.
Yeah, the Nintendo,
So,
when they finally decided to get away from the cartridges, everybody was finally like, wow, Nintendo's getting away from cartridges, when they pulled out the Nintendo GameCube. But it was those little miniature cartridges, well, miniature CDs, I should say. It wasn't the regular size. And so that's where they started. So when they finally adopted the full-size CD format for the Nintendo Wii, and it brought that that family play style together with the wireless remote controls where you can use the gyroscope. They were the first ones to pretty much introduce that. That really boosted their sales again and put them back in the market, where they had lost a lot of fan base because of their transition to the disc format with the Nintendo GameCube. So yeah, man, they revitalized themselves with the Wii, and to this day, the Wii is a very popular second in game system. A lot of people still own that. And then they introduced the Wii U, which was a upgrade to the Wii, but it also had a mobile gaming system that came with it as a controller that you could take with you, which I guess was a predecessor to what they were going to hit us with next, which is now in 2019 one of the most popular game system is the Nintendo Switch, which is literally a mobile game system console that has a dock that hooks up to your television, but majority of the time you take it with you. So, man, Nintendo, well, I tell you,
Smart.
yeah, they keep, I mean, they keep, and they're pretty much gotten rid of any kind of physical, um, game storage. They went back to the cartridge. It's like now it's on like a miniature cartridge thing that looks like a SD card. So there's no disc or anything. So we're kind of going in reverse with that, as far as the evolution of how the games are stored. So, but most of it's in the cloud now, man. The cloud is the thing. That's where uh that's where people keep most of their games. They keep it in the cloud. They download the content to their consoles and they play via the internet. So, yeah, man, I don't know where we're gonna go from here, but it's gonna be some freaky stuff. I tell you, they're already developing crazy realistic virtual reality for systems. So I guess that's going to be the new platform.
Yeah, I think that'll be the next step is to go virtual. Put on that put on those glasses or whatever, and then you're in the game. Like you're literally in the game.
Yeah.
So virtual reality would be the next step that I can see them taking. And I know we did skip over PSP. Sony did release PSP. That was something that I did buy, something that I definitely enjoyed around 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that for the little bit that it was out.
Yeah,
But yeah, games have just grown.
Yeah, the PSP was definitely, um, you know, it was a groundbreaking system in the way that you could play full quality PlayStation games in a portable device, and I think that's kind of where Nintendo got their idea to move forward with what they were doing because they saw the popularity of the PSP. Um, so the Switch would, be the thing that came out later on for that. So, but without the popularity of the PSP, which I really think, comes from the idea Sega had with the Nomad. The Nomad was a portable Genesis way back then. I had a Nomad, but you could take it with you. You could plug it in, play it on the television. It acted as a controller. It's pretty much the same thing as the Wii, the Wii U, and the Nintendo Switch could do. So,
Hmm.
yeah, man. A lot of these ideas the gaming industry has is just they're really just copying off each other, trying to make each other ideas better. So. Yeah, but and a lot of funny thing is a lot of people consume games on their phone too. We kind of skipped over that era, but once the smartphone really came into existence and downloadable video games and content became a thing to do, a lot of these gaming companies switched to developing games for the phone, and they made millions of dollars. I mean, think about Angry Birds. How popular that game got, and Flappy Bird, and games like Ninja, Fruit Ninja, and Cut It. So just all of those games as well. And then like we were talking about last week, you have software makers making these interactive cell phone games like the Pokemon Go and the new Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter game. So, the Wizards Unite. So, yeah, man, the gaming industry and how we consume games, now we have so many different ways that we can choose, man. There's something out there for everybody because people still love cartridges. I go to video game stores and I still see all of that stuff. Everything we just talked about is still being sold and bought. So
That's right.
yeah, man. So I don't think it's
That's
gonna.
right.
I don't think it's gonna go away as long as you got people out there that wants to consume it. And with the release of the all of these mini consoles, where you have preloaded games on mini consoles, people still want those as well. You got the mini Nintendo, the mini Super NES, and now the mini Sega Genesis is coming out this year. So that's another platform. And then the arcade systems are making a comeback with these miniature arcade systems that you can put in your house. and you could play. It looks like an arcade game right in your house. So, man, I tell you, boy, our appetite for video games in all different media formats is still there. It's funny. That's the only media format I really see where people really kind of they have their favorites and those platforms still stick around, whereas video has moved on to streaming and Blu-ray, and music has moved on to pretty much 100% streaming. And some people like DVDs, even some people still like vinyl, but not as much. But as far as video games are concerned, man, like all formats are wide open. People love them all.
That's right. That's right. Now, we're going to cover one more thing. Can't leave this out, and that is music.
Yeah.
How has us listening to music has changed? Now, in the 80s, I had relatives, and I'm sure you have plenty of relatives, they had collections of vinyl.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Sure.
They had albums that were on vinyl.
Yep.
Stevie Wonder, the Commodores, the Temptations, you name it.
Yeah. That was definitely the medium of choice. The 12-inch vinyl played on a record player. My grandmother had a bunch of 45s. They're like the really small
I remember
vinyl
those too.
player. Yeah, you had to have like a little special, port for it on your record player because it had a bigger hole. The LP had the small tiny hole you put on the record player, but this one had the big hole, so you had to have that special connection to make sure it sat on there correctly. And it usually only had like 4 songs, 2 on the front, 2 on the back. So I guess it was like their version of a single. And so I remember that format, growing up, and those things used to be like pieces of furniture in the house, man. My mom had this really long record player. It looked like a drawer, like some sort of counter drawer, but when you open it up, it was a record player and it had built-in speakers. And so, yeah, I remember, having birthday parties and playing music on that thing, man. And that was my first music medium was records and 45s. So.
Yeah. And then, now I got first introduced to cassette tapes when I was real young, probably about 4 or 5.
Right.
I remember like having mixtapes, and these mixtapes would have LL Cool J on it, and it had Run DMC,
Right.
and stuff like that. So I used to rock out, whenever I was in my room or going to sleep. I would just put on that mixtape, and it would just have, LL Cool J and Run DMC on there. So, yeah, that was my first introduction was the cassettes. And in the late 80s, early 90s, cassettes were the thing. I mean, that was killing it, right? Walking around with a Walkman or a boombox outside.
Yeah, the cassette was the first, medium that allowed you to really be portable with your music. So, yeah, cassettes definitely did that. And then before that, though, I actually remember my uncles having these big, like, rectangle things, and it had the picture of the artist on the front, and then at the top of it, it was like a strip of some sort of videotape looking thing, but it actually was music on it, and they would stick it in their deck, this big square, and I found out that was an 8-track. So the 8-track tape players was a medium that came out before cassette, and so I remember those, my uncles and different people I knew playing those 8 tracks, and that was a predecessor to the cassette. But yeah, the cassette was like, when that came out, man, it was like what blew the music industry up as far as sales is concerned, because people were buying them by the droves, by the millions, man. People were buying them by the millions for those things, and they were so easy to produce. The problem was now that they were so easy to produce, but they also were so easy to copy. So now you started having a lot of artists not getting the money that they wanted because their tape was being bootlegged and sold on the corner. Because, they had the regular tapes, but you could also buy recordable tapes. And every tape deck, I don't care what tape deck you got, came with a recordable part of it on it. So you could record any tape deck you got, whether it was a boom box or stereo system. The only ones I didn't see that recorded was the like miniature tape decks, like the Walkman. That those didn't record, but everything else recorded. So yeah, people would dub their tapes all the time, and like you said, you got a mixtape with different artists on it, and that was made possible because of the tape system, the cassette tape system. So that became a big issue for the music industry with the cassette tape, and I could see why they tried to transition when they did.
It did. It transitioned to CDs.
Yep, yep. So compact disc was the transition. So CDs became that's my favorite medium to this day. I still love a
Me
CD.
too. That was my favorite,
The
man.
reason why is because the quality that you get on the CD is so high. Like even when I listen to stuff and I'm streaming it, even if I download stuff, the lossless sound that you get from a compact disc, it just is unparalleled, and there's so much stuff you could put on there as media, and then it just looks good, with the silver on the bottom and then whatever picture or however they do the cover and then the actual CD case, the jewel case. It was a work of art, man. I've seen some people do some really unique things just packaging their CDs. So, I still love that format to this day. But yeah, that was really big. That really took the sales to another level when it came to that median. So yeah, CD was next, and
And then after that was what, MP3s?
well, actually, I was gonna say, do you remember the short-lived transition to mini disc?
Yeah, I remember mini CDs, mini discs.
The
Yeah,
mini discs, they were like mini CDs, but they were in like this square plastic protective package, and so
very small.
very small. I think it was a Sony product. As far as the main company that did it, because all I saw was Sony artists on it. Like when I went to the store, I would only see Sony artists on the mini disc. But I never really got into it because it was so expensive for the mini disc player, and so I just really never really got into the mini disc. But that was a format that they tried to put music on, but it didn't catch on. The CD still outsold it, and then I think the CD was just king of the hill until, like you said, the MP3. When the
MP3s,
once,
man.
yes.
Now the way that broke out was when we got introduced to the internet, right? Like AOL, when that started getting popular.
Yeah.
And, when Napster came on the scene, oh my goodness.
Yeah, when
people
yeah, when people were able to use their computers to rip music from their CD and create this MP3 product and be able to share their music with friends. Like we used to share our CDs all the time, but like, what if a friend lived in Washington and you're still in Florida? You couldn't share the CD. So now this digital sharing is what really boosted the MP3 into popularity. Plus, it was so small as far as the file size was concerned. It didn't take as long to download like movies did when we were talking about the movie section and video section. So this became very popular, and Napster really took advantage of it in their social media platform. And so
and LimeWire too.
LimeWire, yeah, and it became a real big concern. Funny thing is, I was watching a documentary on LimeWire, and the first artist to really blow up on LimeWire was
Soldier Boy.
Soldier Boy. Yeah, Soldier Boy was the first artist to use LimeWire to blow up, man. He what he would do is he would name his song like whatever the popular song was, and so you don't know what it is when you're downloading. You just see the name, and people would download it by the millions. And although they, didn't want that song, they would keep it and listen to it because it was catchy, and it was like, man, I spent all this time. I'm just listening to the song. It just ended up staying in their playlist. So before he was even signed, he was already platinum from downloads because his song
Wow.
had been downloaded millions of times around the country. So that's how Soldier Boy became really known. And then you connect that with his YouTube use, and boom, you get Soldier Boy Tell Him. So man, he was before his time as far as and marketing was. So once that happened, once he did that, and everybody wanted to do it, and that's where people started getting away from LimeWire, or verification started. So the software started allowing you to preview like a small snippet of it, you know, and so you didn't have to download it. So if you previewed it and it wasn't the song you want, you just wouldn't complete the download. So
Correct.
yeah, blame all that on Soldier Boy.
Oh man, I had so much fun doing that for a little while, man. Because it was like, what? You telling me I could just type in an artist name, somebody that maybe there was an album that you didn't listen to, or
Yeah,
maybe there was an album that you heard, like this one song that you really liked, but you never
right.
owned it, and you had a chance to go back and get it. It was like,
Yeah,
oh man.
yeah. It definitely showed the popularity of people doing that, and it showed the industry that they will be able to make money off of these streaming services that they develop down the road. So without LimeWire, we don't get Spotify, we don't get Google Play,
Correct,
we don't get iTunes. So yeah, man,
correct, correct.
it all came down to it's Apple's fault because Apple created a device that can hold 3,000 or 30,000 songs. I forgot what they advertised, but it was a huge amount of songs. But like nobody had that many CDs, you know. So and nobody was gonna go spend all that money on 30,000 songs, you know. So
Right.
of course digital downloads became popular because you want to fill up your iPod. You bought this $600, $700 device or however much it was when it came out. You want to use that bad boy. So I blame Apple for the boom.
That's right, man. So here we are, right? Now we are at the level where we're streaming everything. We're streaming our music. Our movies are being streamed. So the final question is, where can we go from here? Are we going to be stuck on streaming for a while? Or is something else going to come along to push this to the next level? What could that be?
Well, the next thing is gonna have to be something that disconnects us from the internet. If we don't find anything that disconnects us from the internet, then streaming is gonna be around for a long time. But that to me, the median that we have now is based on the popularity of the internet and how much we use it on a daily basis. So I'm not sure what it could be, but maybe something that's like something sort of like how Bluetooth came into existence with that wireless connection, but yet not being connected to the internet. Um, Something like that, to where you can transfer files and media between customer and retailer without actually having to use the internet. So, maybe getting your own IP address for your phone, something like that, where you got your own address. It's not an IP address because that's an internet address, but it's some sort of address that's connected directly to you so you can shop, and buy things, digitally, but without being connected to the internet. So that's what I think. Whoever is able to create that media platform next. That's gonna be the next wave. But until then, man, it looks like streaming is gonna be it. Cause I don't know, I don't know where else you can go. I mean, everything is wireless now because of the internet.
That's right. I'm the same way. I don't know where else you can go from here. It's like, okay, we made it. Like, this is the final stage.
This is the final stage, man. Like, I don't know. It's funny because it feels like we're going backwards. You know, I see people selling tapes again, cassette tapes. I see people buying, CDs on a consistent basis for music. I see, with the Nintendo Switch, the miniature cartridges or the SD cards loaded with content on them. People buy those. As far as music is concerned, people sell hard drives, miniature hard drives with their album preloaded on it, or a miniature scan disc that you could just slide into the back of your phone and the album is on there. So people sell those. So it's like we have the wireless format, but at the same time, some people want that physical still, so they feel like they have ownership. Because I think through all of this, we've kind of lost ownership, as far as going so digital and so wireless. Like, I feel like I don't even buy digital products on a consistent basis because I feel like I don't really own it. Like I don't like to buy digital movies or buy digital albums because I feel like I don't even own it, you know, unless I'm able to download it. But some content you're not even allowed to download. You have to stream it. Like I can't buy my Netflix movies. I have to stream them. So I don't, I'm paying for it, but what do I really own? I own a service. And so, but that service can be disconnected at any time without my
Yeah.
consent.
They could
So
take movies away anytime.
they could take,
You
yeah,
see Netflix, they'd be like, hey, at the end of this month, we're taking away this movie.
yeah, exactly. And I'm like, but that's my favorite movie. I pay for that every month. And it's like, but so what? It's gone. You don't own it. So yeah, man. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know where we're gonna go, but it's gonna be an interesting ride. And my kids are gonna go through it, and they're gonna get a chance to, see whatever next medium is, and I'm gonna be an old grandpa trying to figure it out.
That's right. Hey, well, thank y'all for listening to this episode. We covered a lot, and we appreciate y'all for listening. So, once again, we'll talk to y'all next time. And peace.
Peace out.